Welcome back for another episode of Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia. Today, I am doing the second episode of our Out Athlete series. So this series is where I interview athletes that are at the top of their game and they have come out. I had the absolute privilege today to interview Atkin, who is an openly gay national hockey player. So he plays for the Kookaburras. That's the Australian men's hockey team. He is the only international player to be openly out on any of the national teams. So this, for me, little old Dion here, Mr. Gay Pride Australia 2022, got to interview a national team member. I can't wait for you to hear Davis's experiences and how he has fostered some great work within hockey in Australia. You are listening to Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia. I am your host, Mr. Gay Pride Australia 2022, Dion Alexander. And a big welcome today to a very special guest, Davis. Welcome to Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia.
Thank you. I'm very excited. Very excited.
We're very excited to have you here. I'm very excited to hear your story. Now we're going to dive a little bit deeper into who you are, unravel everything for those that don't know. I am very excited about today's episode and to hear from you. This is obviously making a part of our athlete episodes, so I can't wait to hear a little bit more. As everyone knows, sport's my big passion, and to hear from our athletes that are at the top or getting near the top of their sporting careers is absolutely phenomenal. So first question, you are a hockey player, Davis. How did you get involved in hockey?
It's funny because, I think about it every time and I sort of have a different idea just because I can't really remember most of the time. But it was around, probably 12 years old, maybe. Me and my best friend at the time went to just a little hockey clinic down at the hockey center. Her brother got involved a while ago, and so he recommended us go. We both absolutely loved it. We're both really sporty people, and so pretty much just went from there. We played for the same club at the time, and we've always sort of followed each other throughout the sort of pathway of hockey. So we're both at a really high level. So it's cool to think about how we started together, and we're still going together at the moment. So that's probably where it was.
Awesome. And I find that happens so often that you'll make friends at a really young age in sport. You'll probably have a wide range of friends when you first start. And then as you start competing, sort of state level, and then as you go into international level, sort of you keep friendships, but there'll always be one person that sort of comes along for the ride with you. So I always love having that and love hearing that.
Yeah.
So obviously, started at 12. What age did you realize that, hey, I'm actually pretty good at this and might be something that I want to take seriously and want to take further?
So I'd probably say almost the same year or the year after. I think I was using a wooden stick back then that was just the cheapest thing that I could get. And I trialed for a school sport team and I got into the train on it and I was like, oh, okay, wow, that just happened and it was like my first year. So that was probably like a little glimpse, but where it started to get a bit more serious was when I made another school sport team, but it was in a higher age group. And so you could go on tour. I went on a European tour at an under 16 sort of tournament. And because why I'm saying that is that after that, I got involved into an academy afterwards where you were training pretty much every day. So I would probably say from that point onwards, and then there's a pretty set up pathway for hockey in regards to different age groups. So school sport was probably the start for me.
Awesome. And every sport's different. I've been on a sort of international sporting pathway myself with 10-pin bowling, not as well structured as hockey. But, I always think about back at, when I was a young age and you say you started to really think about taking it seriously from 16. And it's when you're really coming of age as a person, but there's a lot of commitments then. You said you were training every day. I'm always interested to find out from other athletes what sacrifices have you had to make in, particularly in that time, to get good.
Um, yeah, I because you're in combination with school, it's even harder. So for me, the biggest thing that I couldn't do as much was spend time with my friends.
Yep.
I had the time at school, which was really nice, and I really appreciate the time that I had with them there. But outside of, school hours, I just didn't have time to necessarily spend more time with them or uh, delve into different sort of things that I might enjoy otherwise. So um, the time that I did get off was very much around relaxing and doing nothing. So uh, yeah, my friends always still give me shit for it sometimes that I don't always get involved, but they know that it's for a reason and they accepted that. So I'm really happy that um, I'm really happy they still stuck along with it though.
No, it's great, and it's really good to have, like, you need those supportive friends, but at the same
Yeah.
time, they do give you some backlash. I know. I think I missed my best friend's 16th birthday, her 18th birthday, her
Yeah.
21st birthday. I mean, the competition we went to was in October. Her birthday was in October, so always
Mm,
got in trouble for that.
yeah.
When did you first have thoughts that you might be gay, or started really questioning your sexuality?
Again, it's probably a hard one because so for me, and we'll probably touch on it later, I've never really had like a full-on realization. It's sort of been a very gradual thing that um, I sort of just had thoughts and then didn't really think of it. So it would probably be around sort of similar time of me starting hockey, around maybe 12, maybe a little bit less. I can't really remember specifically, but you would see it would be those little things like seeing a shirtless man in a picture, and it would just be like, oh, okay, like that's I'm unusually attracted to that instead
Yeah.
of seeing, all these magazines of bikinis and whatnot. So um, yeah, it'd probably be around the same time, which, would have been a bit harder thinking about at the time because you would have an increased load in training. You're not seeing your friends as much. Yeah. I'm thinking about it now. It just doesn't, I can't believe I got through it so easily.
And that's one of the things that, I always try and paint a picture, because I think sometimes people think of sports people as like, oh, that must be really easy. Like, you go and you do something that you love doing every
Mm,
day, and you
mm,
participate, you just go on. All they see is game day, and they see people winning medals, particularly Olympians winning Olympic medals, gold medals, because Australia's good at sport. But I don't think they really see that, what it took to get there.
mm.
And I always think of, an athlete has to give up a lot to get to be successful and get to represent Australia and their country.
Yep.
But then, like you're saying, at 12, you've probably started to have thoughts around your sexuality. And then to have that on top of all of the stuff that you're giving up and not being able to, have your friends around as much as you would like, it's a really difficult thing. And kudos to anyone that does it, because it
Mm,
is very difficult.
yeah, absolutely.
What was the sort of, what was your take on the whole hockey community around there at that time, as a young person, and potentially, you being a gay hockey player? What did you think the hockey community may think of that?
So at the time, hockey was never really something that I felt, what's the right way of saying this? It hockey at the time wasn't very much about inclusivity at the time. I think it's very much a thing now, which is really good. But at the time, I almost didn't think of it in that because it was never really brought up to me. It was never really advertised. It was never, broadcasted as being an inclusive sport. They weren't advertising themselves as an inclusive sport. I knew that there were people in the sport, especially at the club level, that were involved, that were in the queer community. Um, but for me, at a young age, I didn't really think of it too much afterwards when I thought that I was gay. It was more of a space where I didn't have to think about it.
Yep.
It was more of a space where I could just play hockey, with other really good people. And so I think definitely now they're making really good strides in that sort of space, especially at the club level. But at the time, I didn't really think very much of it, to be honest.
Yep. Yep. I suppose that being such a young age too, I think you go through the motions
Yeah.
and you get really excited to get to that next level.
Yeah.
Um, Obviously, your crowning achievement, you were named in the Kookaburras team. So those that don't play along at home, that's the Australian men's hockey team. Earlier this year, how did that feel for you?
First off, it's always going to be that really big buzz of excitement. I'm sure anyone that gets to debut for their country in a sport always has that feeling straight away. I think for me, there's a couple of different parts, but so my year has pretty much been fast tracked over the past year. I think, last year I was struggling to make a junior team, whereas, I had a really good national tournament and I got fast tracked onwards to, a tier one development squad spot. And from there being able to debut, which was just, I think after that excitement, I got a bit of, almost like a grounding effect. I was like, holy shit, like I'm actually going to do this. And I was not expecting to do this, anytime soon whatsoever. I was planning, far down in the future. Um, so I think after those two sort of feelings, I had a bit more of a feeling of what this is going to mean for myself being a gay athlete. I think, I was pretty confident in who I am. This is the start of this year. And um, we were playing in India. So I think that my first reaction was if I'm going to be safe. Um, I'm not really sure what their views are and whatnot. So, but the second one was I was wanting to be confident in myself to be present as a gay athlete, and that would be 100% be part of my sort of profile going into that as well, because that was something that I wanted to drive. So that got me even more excited.
Awesome. And do you think now being out, and I want to come back to coming out story and that sort of stuff,
Yep.
but do you think now being out and being true and authentic with yourself has, accelerated or helped with your performance as an athlete?
It's a good question because, if you originally I probably would have said yes. And I definitely think that it has played a part in it.
Yep.
My coming out experience in hockey's been a bit, I don't even know what the right word was, so just disjointed. It wasn't the greatest event. I'm not sure if you've read it, but after being outed, unfortunately, to the coach who was the junior coach at the time for Australia, it really affected my drive to play hockey. And this was when I was around 19, maybe 19, 20. And so I think that sort of experience, I took some time away, really evaluated what I wanted to do with my life. And so it's especially hard since you put so much time, especially as a teenager and a young kid, into this sort of sport when you don't really know anything else. And then for it to not be there, you're sort of lost.
Yep.
So during that down period, I was quite, scared that I wasn't sure what I was going to do with my life really, because I had put everything into it from a very young age. Um, but coming into this is the national sort of tournament again, where last year where I performed quite well, that was where I sort of stood my foot down on being, a bit more out in the community, a bit more sort of present for everyone to see. And I think ultimately that did help me play a little bit better. When it comes to the international level, I'm not really sure yet because I'm still very new. But hopefully soon. Yeah. I mean,
Big,
I don't know. Fingers crossed.
fingers crossed, right? Fingers
Yes. Yeah.
crossed.
Yeah.
There's Paris
Yeah.
around the corner.
Yes. Yep. Always a possibility.
Yeah.
Always a possibility.
Not to put pressure on you, but yes.
No. 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 The team actually
It's,
comes out on Friday for the
oh,
next
does
year,
it?
so yeah, not for Paris though,
Oh,
but for the squad.
for the squad. All right.
Yeah.
Well, we've got everything crossed for you. I will get the rest of the gay community to cross everything for you as
Yes.
well.
Yep.
That would be absolutely amazing if that did happen.
Mm.
And I am sure from everything that I've seen online, it'd be very well deserved too.
Mm.
There's a couple of things that I did want to, pick up from there. The first one, probably, you did mention India, and that's where you were part of the Kookaburras team. And I know that it's a country where, it LGBTQIA plus people are accepted, but when I was over at Mr. Gay World, the week before, the Supreme Court said that same-sex marriages were not constitutional. So still a country that's got a way to go with their laws, and also then just the public opinion as well.
Yeah.
And this is one of the things that I faced. I went and represented Australia in Abu Dhabi, which has terrible,
Wow.
terrible human
Goodness.
rights, a record. How does it make you feel potentially having to go and compete in some of these countries?
Um, not yeah, you question your safety
Yeah,
ultimately. That's the first thing that you think. I always used to refer back to Tom Daly. I'm assuming you know who Tom Daly is, the icon, the legend. And he has, always been very outspoken about these countries that, especially, I mean, sport is, his life. So, but the same sort of thing around what these countries are doing to the LGBTQI plus community. And so, for me, um, I'm very fortunate living in Australia for it to be a safe space. But India was definitely the first realization that, okay, I need to actually have that extra sort of step of, if I'm going to be safe in this country, what do I need to do to be present? Um, but thinking about, like, I think Oman is holding a Hockey Fives tournament next year, and it's just like this. I'm very confused on what the line is between,
yeah,
for organizations to put competitions in these locations, like the Football World Cup last year. Was it last year? Like,
yeah,
that was an
yeah,
absolute dismal. Like, I
yes,
can't imagine that going forward and being there, especially when you can't speak out when you're there about it.
correct.
So, um, yeah, I think for the majority of countries that do play hockey now, it's okay. But if they're going to be putting more tournaments in these locations where it's not so safe, then I really have to question whether I can go or if I want to go, really, to be
Yeah.
honest. So,
And like that's something that I find really sad, because you're obviously talented enough to make the squad,
mm,
but then the host country, is not accepting of our queer community, and that makes you want to question whether you go. I find that sad, because I always think that talent should win in sport,
yeah,
and talent should have the opportunity, right? But yeah, it's something that we've put on the radar, and something that I wanted to take when I was representing Australia at Mr. Gay World
yeah,
was like, we really need to campaign, and
yeah,
these
yeah.
sporting organizations need to step up and be like, well, I'm sorry, you can't just exclude, and you can't
Mm,
have this terrible laws around a part of society. Um, and I really hope that that'll get there. The
100%.
other, oh yeah, well, I think maybe it'll take
Because
10
it
years.
it would drive. I think it would. I mean, it's probably the same for you. It would drive you to sort of even go to those countries just to be present, right, and
Correct,
seen, which I kind of want to do at the same time.
correct.
So,
I wanted just to loop back. You did mention about being outed to the national junior coach, and I was hoping that you'd be able to talk through that time for us. You know, what was that experience like? I know you've stated on the record, out in the media, that you don't want anyone to have to experience that, and
mhm.
I'm always in favor of people choosing to come out on their own terms. So
Mhm.
I'm disappointed to read that that happened to you. But what was that like for you?
So at the time, I think why it hurt so much was that it was a trusted person. It was a trusted psychologist, and so that was probably the worst part, really. But hockey, again, sort of refer back to what before was, that hockey's been a space where I haven't felt like I needed to come out at that point. It was more of a space where I could just play hockey because I was good at it, really. No one really thought anything different from me. I had to be fair, I did have my Instagram page, which is public, and so people knew that I did beauty stuff. But again, it was still a space where, especially going to junior camps, where I didn't feel comfortable um, talking about things I enjoyed, talking about how I was gay, because you didn't know how people were going to react. And so um, that experience was definitely traumatizing. Um, it took a while for me to get over it. I'm probably still getting over it now. Um, at the same time, I am very glad that the person that it did happen to was that coach, because he was probably well, still one of my most trusted coaches and allies that I have. He's been amazing. There's been a few bumps on the way, and I did let him know about those as well. Um, but taking that time away was really good. Some negatives as well, but it was a good time to sort of reevaluate the experience. I worked with another psychologist at the time. We worked through it all. It was really a sort of bonding moment with hockey in a way. And then to sort of come out of that in a couple of months to then go to a junior camp, which is what I needed to come back for, and perform really well. I was really inspired that I could do that. And it sort of has been a building block for other obstacles that I've had to go over, now, especially coming into the national scene at a senior level. I think that's really helped me in being more resilient in those sort of areas.
And I love that, you've been able to come out the other side of
Mm,
it. And yeah, you see, you don't want terrible things to happen to people. And, I never wish ill on anyone. And I can only apologize for what's happened to you, even though I wasn't involved. But you do see that, these successful people, particularly successful athletes, have to, become resilient, and they are
mm,
resilient. And there's something that always usually drives them and gets them over the line. So
mm,
I'm just glad that you've been able to, harness that and obviously make very, very good out of it. So that's,
mm.
obviously a testament to who you are as a character, and then also as an athlete, which is absolutely fabulous.
Yeah.
Um, how has the reaction been since coming out?
So for initially, it was really good. Um, and so it's an interesting concept coming out because it's again, it's something that someone should be in their own hands 100%. Whereas for me, my coming out experience really wasn't like a sort of set date apart from that.
Yep,
In that, I started my beauty account, and that was sort of in a way my coming out experience, in that
yep,
people sort of sell me online. But I've never, before that point, I'd never told anyone specifically, hey, I'm gay. Not even my parents. They followed me and they knew. And so I've never actually felt like I needed to specifically say I'm gay, mainly because they already knew, but I just didn't feel the need to. And so when it came up to that um, time of when I, was unfortunately outed, I sort of had to go up to my mum, and because I didn't have anyone to talk to at the time initially as it happened, and so I basically had to tell her what happened. And she was amazing and really supportive, and so I'm really thankful for that. Um, so I guess that's my coming out story. It's weird. I'm assuming there's other people that have felt the same, in that they haven't really felt the need to, have this big day, and it's very individual. So
yep.
if that's what's worked for you, 100%. It's whatever works for you at the time.
And do you feel like, how did you feel going into a national team? Because obviously you're going through all these squads and that sort of
Mm.
thing. You would see these people around in competitions, but I'm assuming that you don't play a lot with the other members of the Australian team until you've sort of been named in it and in the squad, right?
So before this year, I'd never played with them. I
Yep,
think I played once at the end of the year, but me moving over to Perth was to train with them.
yep,
Because I made the tier one development squad, which is just the one below. They gave us confirmation that we would be able to train with them every training. So I'm pretty much just integrated fully. I'm just not in the squad, which is just
yep,
funding really. Um, the experience with them coming out, especially debuting, was, it wasn't perfect. They will say that as well. It was a bit rocky in regards to when I got named. I did a radio interview with ABC Canberra, which I really enjoyed. It was a really good interview. But then I found out that I think it was the next day or the other day after, it got posted on the national news. And so that was the first time that it like fully hit, like, so Twitter was just going absolutely berserk. I'm sure you were aware of Twitter being just completely Insane. It's just unrestricted, It's people can say whatever they want, which
Correct.
is fair enough. And so my experience when I got to debut was a bit rocky because the organization of Hockey Australia didn't really respond as well or as fast as I would have wanted.
Yep.
Um, there was also a little bit of lack of response from the team itself. And so there has been a bit of a boundary between sport and I mean, I would love to get your sort of view on this as well between, you're there for hockey 100%, but then like this is sort of the whole coming out experience. They didn't really want to sort of put too much into it because they just want you to like be part of the group. They don't want
Yep.
to think of you as differently, which I really appreciate. But at the same time, I said to them afterwards, and I've given them feedback, and they've taken it on, which is really good. That they needed to do better in sort of supporting me and sort of just recognizing the event, really, to be
Yeah.
honest.
Yeah.
So I don't know what you sort of think about that whole
Yeah, and
situation.
I think it's really, I think people think too that sports people act in a silo, right? So it's
Mm,
like you go on the hockey field and you're just going to play hockey
yeah,
and that's it, right? But I always think, and I always liken this back to the work I've done with the Sydney Swans, that athletes are only going to perform at their best when they're fully embraced and they feel comfortable.
mm,
And you're not going to get peak performance out of someone that is worrying that they've just had 75,000 hateful messages
yeah,
on Instagram or Twitter, right? Like that
yeah,
is going to
yeah,
be playing on your head, no matter what process the psychologist you've worked with on your psychologist. Sometimes the weighting numbers is just going to push people over the edge, and you're not going to be in the mindset. You're not going to be there ready to play the best hockey or whatever sport.
yeah,
And I think that the Sydney Swans and the work I've done with them and the work that they've done through a diversity action plan has really highlighted that everyone is different
mm,
that comes to sport
yep,
and in any sort of organization, right? Like you're trying to get the best out of people, they've got to be in their best brain, like in their best mindset.
yep,
And so I think just to say, hey, you're just a hockey player is not doing you justice. It's not doing everyone justice. So I often think that it's teammates' responsibilities, it's the administration staff, it's the organization responsibility to help athletes perform at their best. And
yep,
part of that, particularly for members of our community, is going to make sure that we create safe spaces and that you feel supported. And
100%.
everyone's going to feel that differently as well. So
Mm,
I think that's the thing that unfortunately makes it difficult sometimes. You with your experience and having been outed is probably going to need different support to someone that's freely come out on their own.
mm,
And it's unfortunate, and I think that sometimes too, when you look at team sports, sometimes people don't like the limelight being taken away from them. So,
yep,
so that'll play into it. But I think as human beings, when we're all succeeding, we're all thriving, then everyone thrives together and everyone does better
mm.
together.
100%. I was saying, so they've got a good setup at the moment with like an athlete wellbeing person, and she's
Yep.
been amazing. And I was also highlighting to her that it doesn't always have to be specifically around, LGBTQ plus I people. I was saying to them, look, we have injuries all the time. Mental health is 100%. You need all these different things, and people working through these things is great achievements that should be identified every single time. It's not a hard thing to do. Say well done. That's all you have to say, right?
Correct.
And all I was asking for was, you know, that happened. That's amazing. Cool. Now we can go play hockey. But
Correct.
there was nothing, and if there was, it was too late.
Or,
So,
or even I think like someone going, hey, that must have been really hard for you.
hmm,
I'm here if you ever want to chat.
yeah,
Like
yeah,
simple things like that, I think just go a very, very long way. It's like, I don't need to be your psychologist, but I'm just
yeah,
going to like recognize that something's happened to you in your personal life.
hmm,
I'm here for you. Right. Let's go win this game of hockey.
yeah.
I've sort of done a temperature test on what you feel like the hockey community is now, and it sounds like Hockey Australia is making some good inroads into, obviously providing athlete wellbeing and that sort of stuff. How do you feel the sort of wider hockey community is now with inclusion and particularly around sort of the LGBTQIA plus community?
Uh, I think it's good. I definitely think it's good, and it's on a track to be better than good. Especially at a club level. I think that there's organizations, you can do like workshops
Yep.
on inclusion. You can do all these different. They've got like um, things that you can do to learn about it, which is really great. So I'm really proud that they're doing that on a sort of Australia-wide level. Um, High level sport, and I think this can be said for pretty much any sport really, is definitely a grey area still. And so that's where, people like me have come in, and it's sort of shaken it up a little bit. But I think that if we can sort of push those club level inclusivity concepts upwards, I think that would be even better. Pushing it onto players almost, or pushing it onto coaches especially, or just people that have power pretty much in these
Mm.
sporting organizations, that need to be aware of these sort of things. I think that would be the main thing really. But no, I think hockey's doing some great things, especially Hockey ACT's been awarded a couple of awards for this sort of inclusivity, which has been really great. They've been amazing. This is my local organization. So um, yeah, that's how I think it's going really.
Awesome. And you know, there was a report recently, and I spent a lot of time, obviously, in the AFL and working with sort of the supporter groups, the pride
Hmm.
supporter groups for the AFL clubs. And one of the things that we've recognised is, and you can see here from your example, sort of the chicken and the egg. So what comes first? Like,
Mm,
is it going to be good for the whole organisation if a player comes out and they're open about their sexuality?
hmm.
Or is it better to do some groundwork first with education seminars, and just making sure that the organisations can handle any backlash or downfall that might happen from a player coming out, and then creating that safe space where players can come out.
Mm,
And I think that both get action, but obviously we can see like you've come out now, and now Hockey Australia's like, yes, we need to do something because this is
hmm,
obviously a problem.
hmm.
And then Hockey ACT's obviously come on board as well, and there's a lot of stuff happening at the community level now through education. If you if we flip that, and if that education had come first, do you think that that would have potentially been a better experience for you?
Uh, I don't think so, purely because I think that education level is at a club level, which
Yep.
is not, I'm not too involved in.
Yep.
I would see it, but it would not necessarily affect me too much because the people that I would be associated with were at a level where it wasn't present with them.
Bring down. Yep.
Um, so yeah, I think it's sort of almost a balance between the two,
Mm,
because you get different levels of hockey skill level, um, uh, being exposed to this sort of stuff.
yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now, I wanted to touch on, obviously you've got a amazing Facebook page with beautiful, skincare and makeup. How did that come about?
Yeah, it's an interesting story to be honest. I This was back in the day when I was one of the few times that I was with my friends in end of high school, sort of 11, 12, maybe a little bit earlier. This was around the James Charles era, YouTube era, where it was very big to watch those sort of makeup tutorials, and I always found it interesting to watch. I always used to watch it all the time, but I would never do it myself. And so my friends started to sort of suggest that I, get started. They gave me some things to try. So I basically just started that from, a little people, my friends doing my makeup
Yep.
in their one of their rooms when we were 16 years old, really. And so I just sort of fell in love really from there. I always found it fascinating watching these sort of tutorials because you could just watch all these people from around the world doing something that they all enjoyed. And so it sort of just evolved from there. I, got some of my own product. I then started posting, I think it was just photos of makeup back in the day, of like really photoshopped bad makeup. Thinking about it now, it's probably I haven't actually
Hey,
gone down into my Instagram that far, but
we all got to start somewhere, right? You got to
yeah, it
start
was just
somewhere.
this was the day when, everything was just smoothed and edited so much. So
Yeah.
I was very on theme, so I'm not gonna talk down on myself too much. But um
But just please don't go flicking too far down the Instagram
no,
feed.
no, I probably have deleted them, but that's okay. Um yeah, and it's sort of evolved into a community now where it's sort of a mixture of hockey and beauty at the same time, which I'm still trying to figure out the niche really, because it's quite unique, which
It is.
is, always a benefit for social media, but I'm trying to figure out how to utilize it as best as I can.
Okay.
So,
Yeah.
yeah.
And I've been reading about, obviously you had some downtime
Hmm.
from hockey after being outed,
Yep.
and you hear a lot of sort of athlete stories. Obviously, your athlete journey didn't finish there, but you mentioned before, particularly around, you invested so much at a young age
Mm,
of making this hockey thing work and doing this hockey thing and it being really successful that you didn't know what else you would do with your life. And you see
mm,
like a lot of athletes struggle when they get to retirement age, and it's obviously a lot younger age than what it is in the workforce. I'm
mm,
sure lots of people are jealous. I'd like to hang up the work from home boots at 35, like some athletes do,
mm,
but they really struggle because all they've known is sport
mm.
and they've had nothing else. Do you think that it's an advantage for you now having that outlet with makeup and beauty
Yeah, yeah, I definitely think has been and will be. It's always been like a side hustle for me in
Yep.
that, I've never really made much money until pretty much last year. But because I still continue to do uni, especially during COVID, you got a lot more time, that mind you, with COVID. But it's definitely been great now because it's an opportunity to earn some more money. I've been able to connect with so many different people from around the world, mainly in Australia, and so it has been something that I've wanted to do more. But again, with an increased load of hockey now, I'm still having to balance everything. I
Yep.
still need to get a cafe job because I need to pay my rent and um, but no, I have always wanted to do a bit more full time, but maybe I'll do a bit more. I don't know. I honestly don't know what's going to happen, to be honest, but it would be cool to do a bit more full time.
And you've just mentioned something there which I think a lot of people don't really realize, particularly in for sporting athletes in Australia. Like you've
Hmm.
represented Australia, yet
Hmm.
you've just talked about having a cafe job to pay the
Yeah.
rent. Like how how does that feel for you, and how do you balance that? I mean, we were speaking before we hit record, and you're in Canberra for the better part of
Yeah.
3-4 months this year. Like that can't make it easy to also have a
Hmm.
casual or part-time job. Yeah, how do you balance that?
So I think just being in high performance sport, you've always had to be very organized,
Yep.
and so that's been the best probably benefit from it in that regard. It's a very complex life in that you have to manage all these different things because you don't get paid enough for it.
Yep.
Even the guys in the national team, most of them have jobs because, it's partly because they need to, pay for stuff, but also what we talked about before, in that you need a fallback plan if you get injured or if you
Mm.
retire, because that was one thing that I was driven into us very early, was to have a backup plan. And this is from when I first got into the academy at 16. So um, I don't mind working at a cafe. I've always worked at it in hospo. I'm getting a bit annoyed at it now, but to be honest, it's sort of a good outlet to meet new people, earn some money, and just not be sort of involved with people that are at hockey because it can get a bit exhausting sometimes. So it's a sort of balancing act because you'd always love to you watch AFL players and you watch rugby players who that's their job.
The
They're on
job, correct.
contract for six figures, whereas I'm not going to say how much I earn, but it's definitely not enough to even cover my rent. So
Yep.
I need to have other means of getting money, but it also has some benefits to it. So um, yeah, I hope it gets better. Olympic years are always better for that, but yeah, we'll see where it goes, really.
Especially if you win medals. I've always
Yes,
I know the
yes,
AIS and yeah, everyone at the Sports Commission loves when sports win
yes,
medals.
yep.
So I think they need you in the team for Paris, win gold medals, and then you can solve all the problems of the world. Hey, done.
Absolutely,
The gays are
absolutely.
coming to save the day again,
Honestly,
just so you know.
Paris is going to be overrun.
It will be.
Mm.
I would love to just finish up and find out, what do you think the responsibility of sporting organisations is for creating safe spaces for our queer community?
So I think they definitely need to keep up or align themselves with things that that Hockey Australia is doing, especially at a club level. So having those workshops, having these sort of seminars that people can look up to whenever they want, if they're online as well, and having in-person ones as well, because each person is very different. Some people aren't necessarily involved online as much as others. Um, and so I think having that spread across the club level, which is generally where most people are, that's the main volume of people, is a really good idea. I think what I said before, sort of floating that up the line a bit to management up to high performance is really key. Especially for people like me, So there's always going to be less people at a high performance level that are openly gay because
Sheer numbers.
math.
Yes.
I don't know, percentages. And so, but those people are really crucial to, especially if they have, a social presence. People look up to them for everything, really.
Mm.
Politics, for social advocacy for the sport as well. And so, I think they're really underutilized. I think I'm quite underutilized by my own. Well, sometimes I'm utilized by my sport, but not for the necessarily the right reasons that I would assume. And so, um, yeah, I think that would pretty much be it, really. I think having people in management really pushing for it as much as they can, bringing in people outside of the organization to, do charity runs or
Mm.
just spreading awareness. Spreading awareness is probably the main message out of it, to be honest. But getting people like yourself, for example, with the Swans has been really good, and just doing that sort of stuff more
Mm.
because I think that they can give you a little bit of a sprinkle once or twice a year and then sort of forget about it, which is so typical. We're just given the breadcrumbs, to be honest. So, um, yeah.
I think particularly too, like you see, it happened during Pride Month, right?
Oh,
Every organization just goes
whitewashing,
on. Yes,
100%.
yes, yeah. So the rainbow wash happens, and I've had lots of conversations about a lot of these sort of awareness days with my best friend that I missed her birthdays because I was off bowling, off
Yeah.
at national bowling
Well,
competitions with. But
yeah.
same for the LGBTQIA plus community, but even things like International Women's Day, and to a certain extent, I always think about like Are You OK Day. Like they're very, very important things, and they're very, very
Mm,
important days. And
mm,
I'm not trying to discredit Pride Month and how good the visibility is to have rainbow logos everywhere. But I think it's really important what we do after that, and what
mm,
happens the other 11 months of the year
mm,
after Pride Month. And that's what you're talking about there, is like it's great to sprinkle and be involved, and maybe go on a float at Mardi Gras and put up this
mm,
amazing
mhm,
Instagram reel saying how inclusive our organization is. But if you're not then backing that up and doing things throughout the year, then what is the real impact that you're
mm,
having? And so I think, yeah, we've got a long way to go there, but it's great to hear that hockey is obviously doing some work there, and particularly
mhm,
at a community level. I always think that's super important because that's going to hit a whole lot of people, and that's really going to, bring the next generation into a very, very safe space. And now, obviously, they've got someone like you who is openly out, and they can see that there's a pathway for them.
yep,
Because I think too often in sport, especially at a young age, we don't see people like ourselves
mm,
in sport,
mhm,
and that's part of why we end up drifting away.
yeah,
Um, so
yep.
yeah, I think that's all great work. Obviously, there's still a lot to be done. I think there'll always be a lot to be done, but it's really good to hear some positive stories and some positive work that's coming about from obviously you coming out, and then hockey really embracing it. So I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, 100%.
Is there any final things you would like to say at all, Davis?
No, I mean exactly what you said before. I did an interview with a Dutch journalist when I was in the Netherlands on tour, and he mentioned to me, I didn't realize that he was used to play for the junior side for the Netherlands, but stopped playing because he didn't feel comfortable being gay, which I found, very just, that's just the epitome of what we were just talking about, is that, especially for the Netherlands, right? And
Correct.
so things like that, Hockey Australia, for example, what I was talking about before, when I, debuted, they said congratulations on the post, but they made a whole paragraph afterwards saying how Australia is an inclusive sport, which is, what I want them to say eventually, but they took away from the fact of the achievement that people make, for example, on mine around, being the first openly gay adult athlete in hockey, but the only person internationally to currently be playing, which
Correct.
I've just, it just mind boggles me how these people sometimes are just so out of it. But yeah, exactly what you said, having people at a high level out is just so important for them to feel comfortable doing that, because it would be so much more helpful for younger athletes coming up to do the same.
Excellent. Well, you are a trailblazer in hockey, and then I can't think of very many other athletes across the spectrum in our Australian teams, particularly when we're looking at Olympic sports. So I know the journey hasn't been exactly what you wanted and hasn't been of your choice, but just a testament to your character that you've got to where you are, and now to be turning around and just providing a great example to future generations, and giving your time for things like this podcast, for interviews and that sort of thing. I think is absolutely fantastic. So from the rest of our community, I thank you for being so open, honest, and sharing your story.
No, thank you so much for having me. I always really enjoy doing these sort of conversations, exactly like you said, to build trust, I guess, in a way, spread awareness. So no, thank you.
No worries. Thank you. And we will see you all next time on the podcast. What an amazing interview. And I cannot thank Davis enough for his time and being so open and honest. His coming out journey was not easy. And it's not, as we said, it's not anything that we wish upon anybody to be outed, but to be able to have grown that resilience and turn it into him now representing Australia is absolutely amazing. And he is doing some awesome work to make people feel safe and included in hockey in Australia. If you want to hear more episodes like this, then please 5 stars, rating and review in your favorite podcast player. And then please send this interview to someone. Send this podcast episode to whoever needs to listen to it. We're really trying to create an environment where people feel safe and secure to be themselves, not only in sport, but in the greater world. So please send these episodes off. We do have a growing back catalogue of episodes as well. So if there's anything that tickles your interest, head down, have a little bit of a scroll down, and please have a look through. Team, that's all we have time for today. Thank you for listening. Until next time, you've been listening to Our Pride by Mr. Gay Pride Australia.